Hi, and welcome to Hustle and Pro. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I'm your host, Kelly Walker. I'm excited to tell you a cool story today of our guest, John Petersen. His expedition was actually featured on the Discovery Channel's show, The Impossible Row. It told the story of him and his team rowing from Chile to Antarctica in 2019. So let's get started to hear from John. All right, so welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, tell me where are you?
Hey, Kelly. Yeah, I am in Oakland, California, which is where I
Okay.
live with my wife and two baby girls.
Very good. So I mentioned in the intro that we're going to be talking about your expedition that the Discovery Channel dubbed the Impossible Row. When I learn about this, I hear like 600 miles of treacherous cold seawater, and I can't even like fathom putting myself in that space. So I want to hear from your words. What was this? And just tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about what this row was.
The row was it was called the Possible Row, filmed by Discovery Channel. We rowed from Chile in 2019, from Chile to Antarctica in a 27-foot rowboat, fully unassisted, unsupported, across the Drake Passage. And Drake Passage is considered one of the most dangerous oceans in the world. It has seen waves up to 100 feet, and is essentially the part of the ocean where the Atlantic meets the Pacific, just above Antarctica and just below South America, Cape Horn. And it's a really dangerous area of water because the shelf that comes up to land about 100 miles offshore rises very quickly, and so you get these hurricane type weather fronts that come in, and they come really close to shore. And when you have big waves in shallow water, it creates the curl effect that you see like in surfing, and those waves are really, really dangerous at 40 feet, 50 feet for boats, obviously, because they can flip them over. And we're
Oh,
talking about big boats, and we were out there in a little tiny rowboat with no sails and just oars and human power. So it's not something that a lot of people have tried to take on before. In fact, we were the first team to try and cross it, with just with human power alone. So it was, I will say, definitely a scary endeavor to begin with, that I didn't imagine myself being in that place, when about a year before that. But there were other people on the team who had crossed oceans. In fact, our captain had
okay.
crossed every ocean in the world,
I want to
basically, and
talk
this was
about
sort of like his
them.
final stretch. Yeah,
I want to
let's
talk
do
about
it.
them too, but I want to rewind. You mentioned a year before that, you never thought that's what you'd be doing. So
No,
going backwards though, you're from California
that's right.
and you had a rowing background since when you were, teenager, right? Youngish. And then you rowed at Yale. Yeah.
Hmm.
So tell me then just a little bit about like how you get from that and then your background, your professional background. It's not like you were in rowing professionally, right? I'll let you explain to us what your day job was. But I'm
Yeah.
so curious how you get from that to going on this journey.
Yeah, let me start with my greatest story of regret out on the ocean that I think will connect all of this. Imagine this: you're sitting in the middle of the ocean, and you look out, and there's no horizon because there's these massive waves moving your boat up and down. You look up, and there's clouds covering every inch of blue sky, and the wind is picking up to 40, 50 miles an hour. You feel 34-degree water splashing off the side of the boat and hitting your cheeks like little tiny pinpricks. And you look down at your body and you feel totally disconnected. You see your arms attached to the oars below you, and they're moving back and forth, but you don't feel them. And you start to just completely disassociate from the experience, the real visceral experience that you're sitting in right in that moment. And I remember being in my first massive storm, with huge waves, and feeling like I had made the worst decision of my life, because I was like, all right, I'm 300 miles from land. I
No
might,
turning back.
yeah, exactly. There's no turning back. There's no way of getting off. You just have to be sitting in this thing. And there's waves that were coming over the top of the boat. And we had a satellite phone, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna call my wife because maybe this will be the last time I ever talk to her. And so I pick up the phone, I give her a call, and of course, it's we were rowing in December, which is summertime down in the southern hemisphere, so the safest time to cross this very dangerous stretch of ocean. And I'm talking to her, and I could hear my daughter in the background, asking to play with toys, and her just, small talk that you would pick up the phone, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And in my head, I'm like, hey, I might die. This might be the last time we talk to each other. I'm kind of laughing about it now, but I feel a little uncomfortable in my stomach just even thinking about it. And,
Yeah.
feeling like this sort of utter regret for putting myself in this moment, and really, putting some core values in contrast, where family is a core value of mine.
Right.
And at the same time, I have ambition. I wanted to test myself and push myself to an extreme. And it's so like those two values came into conflict. And
Yeah.
I just felt a ton of regret in that moment, because I just was putting my family almost in this position of
Yeah.
danger
And you
too.
didn't
So
know how it was going to end at that point. So,
at that point, I didn't know how it was going to end. None of
right.
us did.
Yeah.
And for me, I certainly felt that way in that moment. The other guys may have felt a little differently because they'd experienced similar conditions. But for me, it was sort of sheer terror. So I told you that story mostly because, I like to say, don't be a hero, be human. And in that moment, what was to me the number one thing was going to be getting back home to my wife and the kid. And so, you asked me like where, you wouldn't imagine being there in 2019. A year before that in 2018, almost a year before that to date, I was sitting on the couch, right after the Christmas holiday, reading a story about a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, who had just crossed Antarctica. And then literally within a day, I think I got an email from another friend of mine being like, hey, there's this thing that's going to happen. Do you know anybody that would be interested? And I was kind of like, maybe I'd be
Maybe
interested
me.
in doing that. And so then, there, it kind of all unfolded, putting in crazy training hours,
Yeah.
having a really young child at home. I was working out at, like, I'd get on the stationary bike or the indoor rower at 9 p.m. and row from 9 to 10:30 at night after she had gone to bed, and
Yeah.
would wake up early and work out. So just trying to make it all work with the family, um,
With regular life. What was
with the
your
regular
job at
life.
the time?
At the time, I was a principal of a school, elementary principal in West Oakland, and I had about 500, 450, 500 students at the school, that we were responsible for. And I had been a principal in Washington D.C., a teacher, and so yeah, there was just a ton of responsibility on my plate, and so I always grappled with this sort of selfish self
Sure.
pursuit and all the responsibilities that I have. Ultimately, I'm really happy I did it, but it definitely, even now, I still feel conflicted about,
Yeah, because you had to step
the
away, right?
choices.
Stepping away from the responsibilities at your school, the responsibilities with your family at home, but to go, there's a fine line, right? Where how to chase dreams, but also stay grounded in the life that you're building.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you got the call because you were in a network of rowers already who, I mean, were you rowing if you rowed in college, you knew high level, but like, were you competitively rowing as an adult then your whole life?
No, I would say far from it. I rode in high school. I rode in college, and you're in Texas, right? So for me, I was a football player,
Oh,
and I needed a spring sport, and I
oh,
was like,
wow.
oh,
Okay.
they're like, oh, you're tall. Why don't you go row? And I was like, okay. And in
Is being
California, it
tall
wasn't.
a rowing thing? It's the arm span.
It is. You want to, so as when you're sitting in a boat, leverage really matters. So, the taller that you are, the more leverage you can put on an
Okay.
oar
I did not know that.
outside
Okay.
of the boat. Yeah, a college rower profile, like in the elite, top boats, they're probably between 6'2" and 6'4" or 6'5" and weigh about 200 to 220 pounds.
Okay.
So pretty tall, lean people.
Okay. This is 600 miles. This excursion or expedition is 600 miles. What's the time frame from start to finish of the actual row? Like
Yeah, the
days,
the
weeks?
the the way that we accomplished it. So there's a couple things. I think we went 661 nautical miles
Okay.
in all, between South America and the Antarctic mainland and the peninsula that sticks out there. Um, there was a couple times where storms pushed us backwards 20 nautical miles. So we're rowing and then we're sitting in this storm and we're literally going backwards.
And you have to
Um,
just redo what you just worked. The ground you just went to make up, you now are literally pushed back and you're doubling back. Oh, that's a mental game
exactly.
right there. Yeah.
That's a mental game. The way that we did it is, we tried to take the safest approach, obviously. Um, in anytime you're on the ocean, but it's always a gamble. You're sort of
Yeah.
at the whim of Mother Nature in that case. The ocean is just such a powerful thing.
Right.
Um, but what we did is we took 6 people, and so 3 of us would row in one shift, and the other three would sleep, and it
Okay.
was continuous, 24 hours a day, nonstop. 3 people rowing, 3 people sleeping and eating, and then shifting every 90 minutes. And the reason we did that is because we wanted the bow, the front of the boat, constantly pressed into any type of wave that was going to come our way. Because a dangerous place to
Oh,
be in a wave is broadside, where the side of your boat is sort of against the wave,
taking
and the
it.
wave can then turn you over.
So you want the
And
three
so,
people that aren't rowing, that where they're sitting is the front, that you're saying that's what the wave would hit first. The weight is in the
yeah,
front.
the front of the boat is called the bow, and that's sort of like the nose that points into the wave that's coming at you. And so that bow will break the wave, and theoretically should go around your vessel, your boat, so that you can continue forward. If you go sideways, broadside, that's when the wave can flip you over. And
Yeah.
obviously,
So
ocean rowing
90-minute
is
shifts.
90-minute shifts,
That's a lot of straight
continuous.
rowing. And then you get a whole 90-minute break. Like many of us work out for not even 90 minutes a day, right? And then you get a break, or you rest and recover for a whole day. And then you go back at it for what, 45 an hour the next day or the next day after that. But you're doing 90 minutes every other 90 minutes.
90 minutes on, 90 minutes off, continuous, 24 hours a day it took us 12 days, 12 and a half
12
days to
days.
get across.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
so no wonder you had to get up and work out and then work out at night. And that probably wasn't even enough. I mean, the training, because I assume in your day job, I mean, as a principal and dad and a husband, you're not, before you knew about this, you're not possibly able to like row and work out enough to be ready, right?
No, there's no chance. I mean, as strange as this sounds, well, I'll say this: fitness does matter. It matters being fit when you're about to go.
Sure.
Um, but after 2 or 3 days of no sleep, being constantly hungry, um, facing dehydration, all of your fitness starts to go out the window, because then it becomes a mental
Yeah.
game. And that's where one of the reasons why I was so interested in taking on this expedition or joining it is because it really and truly was a team effort. Um, when you're asleep, so basically 90-minute shifts. So you're rowing for 90 minutes continuously, and then you're essentially sleeping and eating for 90 minutes. So
Right.
after a few days of that, you get that routine down really well. You jump out of your seat, we had this little bow compartment, that really was about 6.5 feet long. So you're almost in like a coffin.
Like a bed.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's cold, right? So that's the tough part of being out on the Drake, is not only there are big waves and big weather, but the water is close to freezing. So you're sitting on water that's about 36 degrees down to almost 32 degrees, and it's freezing. And we quickly learned in those shifts that the only way to stay warm was to be very, very close. And so my partner and I would literally get into the same 2 sleeping bags. So we like double up the sleeping bag, and then, huddle right next to each other so that we could stay warm. And
Yeah.
you start to see the impact of this weather on your body, where, my
Oh, yeah.
fingernails started getting black spots on them from freezing.
Not getting dry
Um,
and warm. Okay, so
Not getting
obviously
very warm.
you become close if you weren't already with your teammates. So I want to hear more about the team. Before we do that, I want to take a quick break so we can pause and hear from a sponsor, and we'll be right back and hear more about this team that you built for your rowing expedition.
Player to Player matches elite high school athletes with younger, aspiring athletes through 1-hour private lessons, semi-private lessons, and camps and clinics. Learn more at playertoplayer.com. That's player, the number 2, player.com.
Okay, we're back with John Petersen. And so, John, so when you get this call and this invite from somebody saying, hey, do you know anybody? And you say, yeah, I might be the somebody to get put out there. Did you know all these people on this crew already, or were you meeting some of them for the first time when you guys set out to do this?
I knew one person,
Oh,
and then the other four I didn't know. So we were coming from 4 different countries. Fionn Paul, the captain of the boat, is from Iceland.
okay.
Jamie was from Scotland. Cameron, South African, and then there was Andrew, who I didn't know, who asked me originally. Andrew is from North Dakota, and we had rowed together in college, so that's how we knew each other.
That's
Um,
cool. What a cool group from all over, right? To join together to try to tackle this. But that's also really
yeah,
hard to put your trust in all of the safety things you mentioned and the stepping away from all your commitments in a group of men that you really don't know. And well, that's a leap of faith right there to just step out and go with these guys. And then you probably have to quickly assimilate to them and their personalities. And how do you balance all that when you're literally out at sea?
it sort of became this thing where we started out not knowing each other and ended a band of brothers.
Yeah.
Ultimately, because we went through this almost death facing experience together, and I think those kinds of things bring people together very quickly.
Sure.
I like to say values make the leader, trust makes the team, and so we talked a lot about trust. And I think trust is ultimately the currency of relationships, and relationships are the foundations of teams. And so we talked a lot about agreements. What agreements would we have out on the water? I'll tell you one harrowing one was, we decided that we were going to wear a 3-foot safety line instead of a 6-foot safety line, because if we flipped over, it would be better to drown in the water as opposed to being strangled by a 6-foot line. So the three
Oh,
foot line felt like a safer
oh,
bet in that situation. That's sort of an extreme example of an
yeah.
agreement.
But
But
yeah.
I mean, you talk about all these things, like how do you actually potentially want to die, is part of that. I think we also touched on
Wow.
things that were most important to us, and I was the only person on the boat with a daughter at the
Oh
time.
gosh.
And so I shared with them how important it was to me to get home, and what that meant, and why safety was going to be the number one thing. I was always going to be talking about safety with them, and getting through it. And so we leaned on each other, in some of the most challenging moments. And I think that it's the reason we made it across wasn't because we had the strongest guy in the world, the most experienced person, although we did have some strong guys and some great experience.
Yeah. I think
It
you'd
really
have to, right?
was, you do, and it was really about how can we come together as a group, support each other through hurricanes and 30-foot waves, and make it out to the other side, together as one team. And so that's really how we had sort of like the Disney like story at the end, where we did make it, and there were penguins jumping in the water, and beautiful whales, breaching
Yeah.
out of
Happily,
this,
it all happily ever
amazing.
after. Yeah. So
But there were plenty of moments where it couldn't have been that, for
yeah,
sure.
when you talked about it going from the physical preparedness and fitness to the mental tough part where you're kind of broken down and you just have to decide that you're going to get through it. Um, do you each motivate each other constantly all the time? And you're more worried about are you worried about yourself more, or making sure that the guy in front of you and behind you are still in it mentally and can keep chugging away?
There's 2 aspects to this. I think there's the personal, grit of being able to make it through on your own, but then leaning on each other when you're at your lowest moments.
Yeah.
And so from a personal standpoint, it really is like this idea: you take care of the little things, and the big ones take care of themselves. We all brought things on the boat that we thought we needed, backpacks full of stuff. And ultimately, I ended up needing like a checklist of 12 things to survive each day. And that list went from 50 down to 12.
Yeah.
And once that routine was established mentally, things got easier because it's like, this is my checklist of things I need to do each shift. And so then it just became a game of let me check off these items. And once I've checked off these items, I've accomplished what I needed in this 90 minutes. So now this 90 minutes is done, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. I'm going to go back to my checklist and make sure they're all taken care of. And so it
Yeah,
became a moment that, and I think that the lesson from there is, a lot of times in our lives, we have so many different demands and so many different things that we need to focus on. And if we can
for
push
sure.
away the things that sort of distract us or keep us from what's most important, in case on that boat, making it safely to Antarctica, we can really, accomplish something great. So
That's
that's
cool.
what I would say about the individual level. Yeah.
I also would think there'd be a natural inclination to withdraw. Like if I'm freezing and cold and mad or whatever, not that you're mad out there, but like, I don't know, frustrated or something and just tired, I might stay isolated and to myself. But I feel like you'd have to verbalize to your crew and your teammates, just so that you all have to keep talking to each other, right? And so that you all know where you are, where you stand, and to just give each other like some camaraderie and feedback constantly. You can't block yourself off, I bet, out there.
Definitely not. And I'll tell you two quick stories of examples of this that happened to me. One of them was we were rowing in the middle of the night. I had started to feel seasick, and we were about 7 days in. Usually your body adjusts after a few days, but in this moment I was not feeling good. And we wore this patch on the back of our ear called a scopolamine patch. And it basically is a medicated patch to help you through seasickness.
Okay.
Well, mine had fallen off and I hadn't realized it. And so I did a shift. I didn't feel good. I went in, I ate some food, and I was like, I don't think I can eat very much, Andrew. And he's like, you got to eat something. So I tried to eat it. I go back out, and then I start throwing up over the side of the boat. I threw up once, keep growing, throw up again. And at that moment, one of my teammates, Colin, he opens up the door and he says, "Hey man, you all right? Do you need help?" And to me, it doesn't sound like a huge act, but when you're 7 days in, having rowed continuously 24 hours a day, you're exhausted, it's your time to sleep, and you've got a teammate who obviously is in distress, and you're taking some time from your sleeping or your eating,
Yeah.
that
So
your own checklist that I was talking about
right.
before to take care of somebody else. It's a
Yeah. They're
huge deal.
deviating from their regimen. Yeah.
So he got out, and we were in a storm, of course, got out of the bow hold, went to get a pack, the emergency pack, got me a scopolamine patch. And, I was able to keep going. And so like, that was a small moment where I remember it really, distinctly, because of not only did he pause from his routine, but he took the time to get me what I needed so that I could keep going.
Yeah.
Was huge.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, how do you take care of each other really matters. And that also goes back into that idea of trust. And then the other piece on it was just mindset. I remember being in a really big storm. To give you a sense of how big this storm was, when we were moving with the wind, without wind, and sort of, you want to call it flat conditions, we're moving at 4 knots, which is like 3 miles an hour. With the wind and the waves, we were going 18 to 22 knots on waves, surfing down these things. And you could hear at the bottom of each wave, the whole boat would vibrate. You hear this hum at the bottom of the waves. And, I was scared. I was totally just terrified of getting back out there, because you see the waves crash over the side of the boat, and it's dark. And I remember going out and saying, Andrew, like, I don't know if we can go back out there. And he's like, we have to go back out there. The other guys are counting on us. You're right. We're going back out. I open up the door, and here comes Jamie, the Scottish guy, looking at us, big smile on his face, going, "This is awesome." In my head, I was like, the hell am I right now? Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy,
Like you're in there thinking
but
it's torture, or it's the worst, and he's like enjoying it. He flipped it in his mind to find a way to make it like tolerable.
exactly.
Yeah, enjoyable.
Exactly.
And then
so
that changes
that's
your, right? Did that then change your mindset?
Yeah. Now, instead of going out and surviving waves, now I'm going out and surfing waves.
Riding them, yeah.
And so
That's so cool.
exactly, like, so your teammates can impact you in your lowest moment, and also impact your mindset and how you might feel about something.
I fully believe that. I have a little 40 tattoo I got when I was 40 that is just means positivity, because I really do believe that your positivity in your everyday life really affects people, affects not only you, but affects the people around you, how you respond to things and just how you talk to people and strangers and friends and everybody. It really does change people's mindset sometimes. Okay, I want to learn about, you founded a startup that focuses on team building and a couple other things. So tell me what that is and why you started that.
Yeah, I shared a little earlier, my journey, I guess professional journey, started as an educator.
Sure.
And right out of college, I went straight into teaching and taught in Washington D.C. In some of the most under-resourced neighborhoods in the country, and I really loved teaching. And so from there, I was a teacher and taught a whole bunch of different grade levels, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh grade. And then I got into working with the district. And then from there also then was like, I really want to be a school leader, and went through training to become a principal. So I was a principal in Washington, D.C., and also out here in California, where I live now, in Oakland, where I grew up. And about 2 years ago, I mean, we all experienced the pandemic, which is some of the most challenging times for many people.
Yeah.
And being a school leader, a principal in the pandemic had its own set of challenges that were just really hard. And I was a part of a school that I really loved, and I had a really fantastic team. And one of the vice principals I had, he was ready to lead, and so made a decision to step aside and let him continue on the legacy that we had started at the school in West Oakland. But it really meant for me, well, JP, what you going to do now? So I ended up deciding to start my own company, which was really focused on team building, and developing leaders. And so now I still work with schools. I work with schools in Richmond, California, Vallejo, California, San Francisco, California, and then I also work in other industries, in the private sector, construction companies, working with leaders who are on the ground doing the work. Your foremen, superintendents, your vice principals, and really helping them develop solid strategies for developing their own value systems.
Okay,
And
I was going to say, is it
building
for
trust on teams.
their style and their like core values and how to motivate and keep teams tight and all aiming towards the same, ultimately like rowing together? Yeah, I mean,
that's a great way to summarize it. It's like I said before, values make the leader, trust makes the team. So we spend it. You
cool.
can't separate the leader. You can't separate the leader from the team, or the team from the leader. They're both connected, and so I work on both things. Building and talking about your own individual values and who you are as a leader, but then also thinking about the team, and ultimately what I think is the foundation of a team, which is trust, and ways in which you can establish trust with your team and build systems behind it that make people feel good about doing what they're doing.
Yeah, because it's not
whether
automatic, right? Like, I don't think we're all naturally just willing to trust everybody that, especially like, is telling us what to do. We all have to earn the trust and build it, and it takes a little bit of time, and the smallest things can make that waver. So that's a really important key part of it. Tell us what it's called. I think you said this already, but I'll put it on the show notes and on the screen. So tell us what it's called again and how people could find out about you.
Yeah, the company name is Threshold Rising.
Threshold Rising.
I call it Threshold, and the website is thresholdrising.com, which people can go to and see some of the offerings I have there. And then I also have Instagram, John R. Petersen, where I post some of the trips that I do. Obviously, I did the row. I've biked from Oakland to Chicago last summer.
Oh, cool.
So just I always try to have an endurance challenge out there,
Yeah.
although maybe not as extreme now that I have two little girls.
Right. You can't go.
But
Yeah. That's not something you're going to try to beat or top, I hope. That's pretty
yeah,
up there. Is threshold rising a rowing term?
no, the word threshold came from just really one of my core beliefs as a principal and school leader, to ensure that kids feel like they belong when they come to school. And
Okay.
so one of the things that I would always do is stand at the threshold of the school, like the school door,
Oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
say good morning to every single person that walked in the building, and then
That's
say goodbye
great.
in the afternoon as everybody left. And you just learn so much at the threshold.
I
Who's
love
doing good
that.
and who's not. And I wanted to ensure that each person that stepped into our building felt like they were getting the handshake and the eye contact and the smile and the
That's
welcome.
really
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
so that's where the name threshold came from.
Here I was thinking it was like the boat and the wave and the
Yeah.
some line or some like term that, was important to your rowing expedition, but that's even better. I love it. The threshold bit. That's great. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it was really nice talking to you and hearing your story. I'm going to link to the Discovery Channel episodes and things like that so that people can learn more if they want to see it, and follow you online on Instagram. But I appreciate you taking the time and Zooming with me from California.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kelly. Appreciate having me on.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Hustle and Pro. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, and so you can get notifications when new episodes drop. And go ahead and follow us on Instagram at hustle_and_pro to see what we've got going on. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.